Oscar and Heidi, do you want, shall I begin the, this is a Zoom meeting and so forth?
Yes.
Script. All
Yes.
right. And introduce the two of you. All right.
All right. Have a
Good
good meeting.
evening.
Thanks, Clay.
Thank you, Clay. Good evening. I'm Jean McKnight, a member of the zoning subgroup of the Housing Plan Working Group. And the other two members of the zoning subgroup are Oscar Mertz, who also serves on the Housing Plan Working Group as a community representative, and Heidi Frail, also on the Housing Plan Working Group as the delegate of our select board. So this is an open meeting of the Housing Plan Working Group zoning subgroup being conducted remotely, consistent with current state regulations, and is being recorded. Although this is a public meeting of which notice was given, this meeting will not have public comment. This is not a hearing. And it's the access is provided by Zoom. We are all on Zoom. And there are only 3 members of the Housing Plan Working Group, and we are all here, so we have a quorum. And no staff, no planning department staff will be joining us this evening. We will be working from an agenda that's been posted, and of course, those, our participants here are familiar with these Zoom meetings and know that anything that we share or state will be a matter of public record. And all supporting materials, which really is only the agenda, are available on the town's website. There is a special website for the Housing Plan Working Group.
Jean, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I just did not hit start webinar, so I was trying to pop in on the cell phone just to see if I was able to join to make sure it was running.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it says we're in a practice session, so we may need
so I just have to begin again. I'll try to be quick.
Apologize for that. I am opening it up now, and I'll make sure that Oscar is still host here. Yep, it looks like you're good to go.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry about that.
Good evening. I'm Jean McKnight. I'm co-chair of the town's Housing Plan Working Group that was established by the Planning Board, and also appointed to a zoning subgroup, and this is a meeting of the zoning subgroup. Also serving on the zoning subgroup are Oscar Mertz here and Heidi Frail.
Hi.
And Oscar is a community representative member of the Housing Plan Working Group, and Heidi Frail is a member of our select board, delegate to the Housing Plan Working Group. And this is an open meeting of the zoning subgroup. It's a 3-member committee, so all 3 of us are here, and that obviously is a quorum. We're just conducting this meeting remotely. We are all on Zoom, consistent with current state regulations, and the meeting is being recorded. Although this is a public meeting, notice has been given, the agenda for this meeting has been posted, but it is not a public hearing, will not have public comment. All supporting materials, which is really only the agenda, are available on the town's website. And the Housing Plan Working Group has a special website, so that any materials that are referenced in our agenda that we'll be working from either are or will be posted on this website. It is www.needham.gov/housingplan2021. And written comments on that any persons watching may wish to submit may be submitted to this email address, planning@needham.gov, with the subject line Housing Plan Working Group. All right, so let's begin our meeting. And even though Mbta Communities Communities Act guidelines are the last thing on our agenda, I propose that we begin by discussing the Mbta Communities guidelines. And I've read them today, made some notes on what I think are most important for us to focus on. And if you want me to continue and just go to what I think are important, and then we can discuss how that applies to our work, I'll go
Yes.
ahead.
Please do.
Okay. One of the important things is the guidelines have eliminated the concept of a bus service community, and previously Needham had been categorized as such, which had a particularly high standard as far as the percentage of housing units in our town that should be our target for rezoning. So the only relevant definition in that regard is of a commuter rail community, which Needham is listed as in the appendix to the guidelines. Then there's the appendix. As long as we're talking about that, I may as well go to page 20, which is the list of communities. So as I said, Needham is characterized as a commuter rail community. The number of housing units in our community in 2020 are listed as 11,891. And our goal is 15% of those units, which is 1,784. Then they have continued with the minimum land area of 50 acres. The guidelines go into some detail on smaller communities that would have reason to not need as much as 50 acres, but Needham is not one of them. We are supposed to have a minimum land area of 50 acres zoned. Also, there's a rule that that a certain percentage of the 50 acres minimum has to be within what's defined as a developable station area. And Needham, you could imagine a town that has a commuter rail station. Oh, thank you. That's page 20. So it'd be the prior page.
Okay.
Oscar, that's helpful.
Hang on. Yep.
There we are. So they've calculated that Needham has 1,223 acres that are within a half mile of our 4 train stations, which doesn't surprise me. And you can imagine a community whose train station, the area within their train station is largely wetland or some factor that wouldn't make it developable, but we've got a lot. So that means 90% of these 50 acres is supposed to be located within 1/2 hour of the train stations.
1/2 mile.
1/2 mile.
1/2 mile, excuse me.
Yeah.
That's not difficult for us to achieve. When we get to talking about the rezoning recommendations, it's almost all that within that area anyway. So I want to point out, going back to the definitions, there's a definition of developable land. And developable land is defined as land on which multifamily housing can be permitted and constructed. And for purposes of these guidelines, developable land consists of all privately owned land. I don't know if you want to go to it. I'm reading it. It's not very long, but it's on page 2. All privately owned land except lots or portions of lots that meet the definition of excluded land and developable public land. But as I've read these guidelines, that definition of developable land comes into play when the town goes to apply for to DHCD for certification of the area that's been rezoned. And then apparently they will exclude certain land. But if in our rezoning discussion, we find some areas which we think are questionable, we can discuss that issue again on developable land. And however, they have to live within the exact wording of the law too, Chapter 40A, Section 3A. So on page 3, they've got the definition of gross density, which means a units per acre density measurement that includes land occupied by public rights of way and any recreational, civic, commercial, and other non-residential uses. So it can seem a little confusing when they talk about excluded areas that seem like maybe they don't include these areas, but they are including them. Now, the definition of housing certified for families, I'm not sure if this is a change from what they said before, but I do note particularly that not only did this housing, you can't be age restricted, of course, because that wouldn't be suitable for families, but there can be no restriction on the number of bedrooms. Now, much of our rezoning efforts in Needham, for example, at the Muzzy site and the over the other side on the overlay district that's on the other side of the highway, sets limits on the number of bedrooms, on the idea that we want just 1 and 2 bedroom units. That's not something we're going to be able to do.
I don't think we'll need to.
And this is why we discussed having the school system actually think in their master plan about what impacts there might be
Yes,
going forward. So that's down the road, but it's definitely something that we need to.
that's
But
right.
also the market is just gonna, I mean, are you concerned about impact on the schools, or are you concerned that?
I'm concerned that we haven't considered the impact to date when the school board met, however many months ago that was, talked about the master plan for the school growth.
Yeah.
They had not considered the additional.
I've been assured that
housing
they're
for
going
families.
to be
Yeah.
moving forward.
No, I think they will, but they just
Yeah.
hadn't done it as of yet. So I think it's it's another reason why.
Yeah,
It is-
because
need
that language was in the draft guidelines, so everyone's aware that.
It was the number of bedrooms. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the only other definition I want to focus on is site plan review. What does that mean? These have to be allowed by right, but the multifamily housing, but it can be subject to site plan review. And they define it here. A process established by local ordinance or bylaw by which a local board reviews and potentially imposes conditions on the appearance and layout of a specific project prior to the issuance of a building permit. So all they focus on is appearance and layout. However, later in the guidelines, they expand on that. So it's somewhat confusing because it does seem later in the guidelines when they talk about site plan approval, they allow reviewing agencies to consider
Yes.
other factors. Yeah. So now and if you, now turning to page 7, and if there's anything you've highlighted or up to that you really want to talk about, just chime right in.
Actually, let's if you want, I mean, we can come back to it later too, but I think if it's worth digging into that gross density issue, I mean, in very general terms, what that says is the actual density on a particular site would be higher than 15 units per acre because of what they're saying is their gross density wants to be 15 units per acre, and it allows you to include this land occupied by public rights of way, recreational or civic, commercial, blah, 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 right? So
Mhm.
I think there's some, that just requires a little bit of analysis to just understand how
Mhm.
we come up with these numbers that meet the letter of this law. That's all. So it's
I know
just,
just reading it, it feels like, well, if you had a zoning district, for example, that was on both sides of a street, and there was 5 acres on one side and 10 acres on the other side, and you the street itself was a half an acre, you'd add that half an acre, so you've got 15 and a half acres, and then you calculate how many units per acre the zoning allows. It seemed to me they understood that a development site is going to include roads and recreation areas and things other than just housing units. But, maybe there's some ambiguity there and they mean to completely exclude the road in the calculation. Is that what you're saying, Oscar? It's
all I'm
not
saying
clear.
is I'm still a little, I mean, to me, that sounds a little questionable because if you're really calculating housing, you could conceivably calculate the road around you and get a slightly different number, but to carry all of the other uses that are potentially of larger acreage, recreation has acreage, civic, commercial, all those things. I haven't had a chance to kind of fully analyze that definition. I want to just, before we speak further about this, I just want to know how I would be doing this math. So
Mhm.
anyway, we'll come back to it, I think.
Okay, and we may see as we go along how that phrase is used later
Yep,
too
yep.
in the guidelines. So I'm turning to the affordability requirements because I don't recall this as being in the prior version.
Right.
It's page 7, and it's section 4, small b. And what it really means is that they won't let us have inclusionary zoning rule that calls for 12.5% of units to be
Right.
They're setting it at
Unless it
10%.
predates.
Exactly.
Right. Which is
Exactly.
nice. Right.
So only in a few of our zones that we're going to be talking about do we have a limit that's 12.5%.
Yeah.
So I think in many cases we are going to have to work with the 10%. For example, the existing apartment A1 zone that we're going to be relying on to boost our acreage doesn't have any affordable housing requirement at all. So that's
Yeah, that's a question. It's good.
yeah,
To look at that, what that impact is.
right. Okay. I think, the emphasis is on encouraging development and not
Right.
discouraging it by having too high a limit. And also another rule in this paragraph is that you can't go below 80% of median income.
Yes.
Like you can't say, well, what we want is 50% or 30%. No, it has to be 80%.
Yeah. I mean, they're being very mindful of making sure it is basically not putting too many restrictions on the viability.
Yes. And then the next paragraph, C, has to do with, as of right use. And this is very much applicable to our Needham Center and other overlay zones. So they say the following are examples of requirements that would be deemed to be inconsistent with as of right use. And small 3 in parentheses, the last thing they list, they say is inconsistent, is a requirement that multifamily use must be combined with commercial or other uses on the same lot or as part of a single project. So, and then the next sentence is mixed use projects may be allowed as of right in a multifamily zoning district as long as multifamily housing is separately allowed as of right. And I'm reading to that to mean as long as multifamily housing that doesn't include, a first floor commercial use is separately allowed by right.
So you basically have the ability to do mixed use or multifamily, and so you can get credit for the mixed use.
Yeah, so you could
credit for the family, the housing that's over.
Yes.
Right.
Right. So suppose in our Chestnut Street Business District, we changed the zoning so that standalone multifamily housing was allowed by right. Also, mixed use housing was allowed by right.
Yeah.
Now, one reason that gets complicated is suppose the mixed use is a restaurant, which requires a special permit. Well, the multifamily housing doesn't require the special permit, but the restaurant does,
Right.
And I almost wonder if, given this limitation, either we consider, as I think we have to, allowing multifamily housing as a standalone use in these districts.
Yep.
That now allow only mixed use. And we may pick and choose and perhaps think Chestnut Street is appropriate, but downtown isn't, because of our goals of encouraging commercial use in restaurants. So that's going to present something we really have to think about, and we really have to think about it tonight.
Yeah.
Well,
So
what
an
are we going to
example of
propose?
that an example of that though might be, along Needham Street, where you've got commercial use all along the street, but then back behind the commercial use, you've got the Avalon development.
Oh, you mean in Newton?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So you've got those two existing in the same.
Yep.
I mean, what must be the same district.
Yeah, they could be.
Probably,
But what this
yep.
is saying is if you require that it be a mixture of uses, that's a problem.
So
No,
what's
I'm just
inter-
saying that it separates itself out.
y-
I mean,
It
it's hard
could,
for me to
yeah.
imagine that the market wouldn't take care of that. I mean, I understand that zoning is a more exact science
Oh,
than
you
I'm used
mean
to, I
that-
think, but
Yeah.
You mean that in the big development, some big 10-acre development, it's likely that way it would end up is this part is going to be separately owned as multifamily housing. It's going to be separate from the other
yeah,
parcel.
I just
Yeah.
don't, it's hard for me to imagine a developer coming into a commercial area and deciding to build a 3-family house. Because who would want to live there? I mean, it's just not marketable. I hear what you're saying about needing some zoning to go along with it. It's hard to imagine.
Yeah.
I
That
think.
What
setup.
about excuse me, I was going to go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, you go ahead, Jane. Finish on.
What about a building like the one that was developed on Dedham Avenue across
Yep.
from the Unitarian Church?
Yep.
Might a developer want to come along and build a building like that? I think it has about 20 units, maybe 18, and have housing on the first floor too, and just have it all housing.
Yeah. And also 888 is an example of where we've been discussing.
Yes.
Whether you do commercial ground floor or whether you have residential ground floor. And
Yeah.
I think that's, so we definitely have an issue here to think about, and very, very timely that we are.
Yeah.
I think,
And
I would just-
888 is the old nursery, 888.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hillcrest Gardens.
Yeah.
I would add that I do think, Gene, in the conversation we just had about site plan approval, the thing that I would be concerned about is if we do multifamily, or we allow multifamily by right as well as mixed use by right, then I think it would be important that for projects that were to come before the town, you'd like to have the site plan approval discussion or the site plan review discussion, because I think it would be critical if you want to think about ground floor connectivity as commercial, like a Main Street, or like Chestnut Street's got is such a mixture of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it's not nearly as clear what's going on and how you don't engage it like you do Great Plain, right, downtown.
Mhm.
But I do think there's some critical issues when we go through Chestnut Street and analyze the where we do these kinds of higher density or multifamily, or where parcels might be put together and you get bigger projects. That will be the time when we're going to want to talk about, is there a continuity issue here? Do we want to have commercial ground floors that are active, or do we want to consolidate them? Do we want to make them, so they're not just happening every now and then, right? It's kind of, there's the importance of mixed use is that you're usually doing it in a district that has a viability or a desire for an active ground floor, right? So it's not by plan that mixed use is critical to this discussion, and housing above retail is very important for our downtown viability and activity, and so I just think it's something that we'll have to keep an eye on, because if you add the multifamily, you could come in and have Hillcrest be resi on the ground floor. You could have something else happen in these districts where you just say we're going to bring housing to the ground floor and not have any commercial, and you could start to see a weird discontinuity with the
Mhm.
commercial ground floors where you actually want it to make it much more viable. So anyway, just a thought.
Yeah. I note that they have a definition of multifamily housing. Means a building with 3 or more residential dwelling units, or you could have clustered buildings on the same lot, but it doesn't have a definition of mixed use housing. Okay, but that I picked that out myself as the most important thing that's maybe frustrating what we had in mind to do, that prohibition on mixed use housing. So
do we agree though that it is a prohibition, or do we agree that there will be, if we allow for the zoning to be both multifamily by right and mixed use by right, then we void that restriction?
Oh, I agree with what you said. The second thing, that if, like, suppose Chestnut Street, we rezone it so that multifamily is allowed by right, standalone on its own parcel, and mixed use with multifamily is also allowed by right, that the whole thing qualifies.
Yes, right. And then
Yeah.
you just have to manage the specific locations where you think mixed use might be more beneficial for the greater good of the
Yeah.
neighborhood. So it's very site specific, I guess, where it's viable for doing one thing versus the other, or where somebody might want to propose one versus the other. So having the ability to do both adds complexity to the oversight or the
Yeah.
site plan discussions.
And I wondered, I also wondered whether there's some possibility of having, like, the Needham Center district with all of its overlays, have some part of it allow multifamily standalone, but not all of it, and yet you can count all of it. That's something
Right.
I'm uncertain of.
But then
Yeah.
maybe those are the things that we just talk about with DHCD, right? In an application
Yeah.
effort, we say,
Yeah.
they have to
Mm-hmm.
they have
Yeah.
to know that multifamily housing is incredibly valuable above retail, and so therefore, why would you not allow it to be counted? But again, it's all a question of, are we meeting the densities? Is there an overall meeting of the density? If we'll have to just
Yeah.
start looking at the math and where we get the density that we need.
And then on page 8, there's a minimum land area. There's a requirement under small a, minimum land area. At least half of the multifamily zoning district land areas must comprise contiguous lots of land. So we still have the 25-acre issue. So see, our the required zoning area is 50 acres. So it looks like they still have the 25-acre requirement.
Yes,
I
that's
was hoping
contiguous.
they'd
Yeah.
do away with that, but they haven't.
Yep.
Now, this is something I don't quite understand in the same paragraph that is right in the middle of page 8. No portion of the district that is less than 5 contiguous acres land, the word of is missing, 5 contiguous acres land will count toward the minimum size requirement. No portion of the district that's less than 5 contiguous area would count toward the minimum size requirement. Well, maybe that's where counting streets and so forth matters, because suppose you want to make an area 25 acres by picking up a piece that's less than 5 acres and adding it to it. Well, nope. I'm just kind of confused about what, and the word contiguous is not defined. So
Right. No, this is not a very, very clear.
no, but some of these things can be asked of town council, but of course we don't have that advice tonight. And this is all new to town council too. I really do think that the DHCD is the agency to ask for further clarification, as you said, Oscar. Yeah. So let's see what else we have to say. Okay. On the next page, what the town, by the way, there's a timeline here. I didn't, that the town has to comply with this by a certain time. Yeah.
So time has been
I'm just skipping
extended.
forward to
Page
page
13.
13.
Yes.
Did you see that? So we're
Yes.
a commuter rail community, and we have to submit an action plan by this
4
January
months. Yeah.
2023.
Well, 5 months.
And the compliance application showing that we have done this rezoning
Is 2 years.
yeah, is right. So we have all of 2023 and all of 2024. That's a lot more reasonable than what they had originally proposed.
Yeah, yeah.
But here, so now going back to page 8, we're talking about Mbta communities seeking a determination of compliance must use a particular compliance model to provide an estimate of multifamily units that can be developed. Right. So here's where you're sending in, we rezoned this, it has this acres, these are the rules, and you have to show. So multifamily capacity of an existing or proposed district shall be calculated using the unit capacity worksheet in Appendix 2. Appendix 2 doesn't have much to say, though. It gives components of the compliance model. I must say I didn't focus on it too much. But then I thought this was an important sentence. This worksheet that they're pointing you to in Appendix 2 produces an estimate of a district's multifamily unit capacity using inputs such as the amount of developable land in the district. All right. That's a term now that I'm a little concerned about. Developable land. Because if you go back, I mean, you can present a district that has 25 acres and meets all the rules, but developable land means land on which multifamily housing can be permitted and constructed, and for purposes of this guideline consists of, I'm back on page 2, all privately owned land except lots or portions of lot that meet the definition of excluded land. And so that makes you go to what's excluded land?
Well, that's, yeah, I think that is wetlands
Yeah.
and so on.
And
right?
then, yeah, they've got all this
Wetlands,
land
parks.
that they say is excluded land.
Yep.
So as we consider each zoning district, we'll have to consider whether we're going to run into problems in that regard.
Gene, I'm just going to ask that we, I don't feel comfortable enough yet with this document and with the contents to be able to really speak intelligently about all of these things that we're getting into.
Yeah.
So we should probably try and stay at a high level maybe and just say,
Yeah.
I mean, I think we've done that to a point, but
Mhm.
you know, when we didn't, there's lots here to chew on and to analyze and to
Yeah.
pick apart and
Okay,
question.
but I circled that, my lawyerly way. Oh, developable land, because that's a defined term,
Yes.
But this I thought was interesting and maybe a little hopeful on page 10, on how to determine a zoning district. If an Mbta community has 2 or more zoning districts in which multifamily housing is allowed as of right, then 2 or more districts may be considered cumulatively to meet the minimum land area and minimum multifamily unit capacity, as long as each district independently complies with Section 3A's other requirements. So suppose we have areas like the Hackney Graymont site that we recommend rezoning as apartment A1. And contiguous to that is, at least on the other side of the railroad right of way, is Chestnut Street. Well, as long as multifamily housing is allowed in each of those districts that meet those rules, you can add them both together. That's the way I read that.
Yes.
Which is going to be helpful in trying to put together that 25 acres, which they still seem to be requiring.
Yes. So we just have to keep our eye on that 5-acre thing, that less than 5 acres. We have to understand how that might curtail what we're adding.
Yeah. And then, we were talking about this a little before. The Section 6 minimum gross density notes that the Zoning Act defines gross density as a units per density requirement that includes land occupied by public rights of way and any recreational, civic, commercial, and other non-residential uses. So, we were talking about rezoning the library, for example, and Greensfield. Seems to be okay. So,
but if you guys tell me if I read this the way you read this, if they're saying gross density is 15 units an acre, and that measurement is over areas that include recreation, public rights of way, civic, commercial, right? So if you're saying I'm going to do some math for my housing, and that 15 units gross per acre is including all this stuff that it's extra acres, then the actual number of units that we're building on the actual housing site is going to be higher.
Yeah,
that's probably true.
So it could be dramatically higher. So I don't even understand how you could say that could even be applied as a rule. It just seems a little bit broad and would affect the math dramatically. And especially if you look at towns that have lower density or smaller areas, Anyway, I think I just need to, all of us
You-
need to
you're-
work through the,
You're probably
is-
right. I've been focusing a little too much maybe on how we're going to meet the 25 acre minimum rather than when you look at the particular parcel, how do you calculate the 15 units per acre? And that's what you're talking
right,
about.
must
Yeah.
have a minimum gross density of 15 units an acre, subject to any further limitations imposed by blah, blah, which is, that's wetlands and Title V is septic, right? Wastewater.
Yeah.
So the act defines gross density, units per acre density measurement that includes land occupied by public rights of way. So it waters it down when you have all that extra land. That's all I'm saying. So the density, the actual on-site density of the housing is greater than the 15 units per acre. So that's, and more than just a little bit. Okay.
Okay. So for purposes, all right, here we have that magic word excluded land in the paragraph at the bottom of the page. For purposes of determining compliance with gross density, the model will not count in the denominator, that is the number of acres, any excluded land. You know, that there's a list of land that's excluded. You can't count it. Except because they have to, it's in the law that they have to allow this, except public rights of way, private rights of way, and publicly owned land used for recreational, civic, commercial, and other non-residential uses. So that seems to clarify what was ambiguous in the earlier paragraph. Seems like you do count that land in the denominator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this tells you right here, if you do that, this is an example of 40 acre multifamily zoning district. And that's however we assemble the various parcels. And you need 15 units over those 40 acres per acre. So you need 600 units. So you get your gross unit target for whatever designated site you have, right?
Mhm.
And then you go into the individual parcels where you would build that project, this project, another project, and you see how you could get to 600.
Yeah.
And so that could easily be everything is 5-story, or there's some 4 and there's some 5, and and it's not 2 or 3 or 4 family units. It's looking like it's more multifamily, higher density
Yeah,
stuff.
that must
So,
be where they're
again,
going.
that's
Mhm.
where, yeah. And so, but you remember what the whole stipulation of this guideline is, you have to do these things so that the density is reasonable for the area that it is in, right? So you don't, that goes back to, at the very beginning of this. What was it under? It was under appropriate density or something like that, right?
Well, one of the definitions.
Yeah.
Yeah, excluded land.
No.
Developable land.
No.
Well, what I highlighted was developable land, gross density. And those seem to me to be the big.
Oh, here it is.
words.
Here it is. Okay. So this is on page 6.
Yeah.
So the multifamily zoning districts required by section 3A should encourage the development of multifamily housing projects of a scale, density, and aesthetic that are compatible with existing surrounding uses and minimize impacts to sensitive land. That's kind of right. So that is the crux of this whole thing. So if when you do your assembly and you see that you're getting things that are proportionally way out of whack scale wise for whatever the neighborhood is, that's where you start to have to figure out what's the right balance of density for what would be appropriate for the neighborhood, right? So reasonable size. So what would be reasonable in one city or town may not be reasonable in another city or town. So, and this is interesting, this is it's basically saying these are areas that are already somewhat mixed, higher density. You've got pedestrians and bikes and access to transit. So these are not rural, and they're not at the edges of towns probably, although a lot of multifamily is being pushed to the edge, like Wellesley's putting all their multifamily out on the edges by the highway and so on.
Mhm.
Anyway, we
Well,
digress.
it may be that when we try to interpret what we're finding ambiguous, we don't fully understand. If you apply these principles, it may help. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, lots to go.
Just a couple more things.
Yep.
Page 11. It talks about sub-districts. An Mbta community may establish reasonable sub-districts. And you know what I'm thinking of when they refer to sub-districts? What I'm thinking of is the different overlay districts, like our Needham Center zoning has 3 overlay districts. And some of those overlay districts, if we don't change them, have rather low height limits and so forth. They may not meet the 15 units per acre. But if the other parts of the district are higher and it averages out, then you might be able to count it all, is the way I'm reading this. It may establish reasonable sub-districts within a multifamily zoning district with different density limits for each sub-district, provided the gross density for the district as a whole meets the statutory requirement.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of a hopeful thing that might be
Yep,
be good.
Yep.
And on this wetland, the next wetland and septic considerations, they quote the statute again with regard to subject to any further limitations by the Wetland Protected Act. But then they say, what does this mean? This directive means that even though the zoning district must permit 15 units of acres is right, any multifamily housing produced within the district is subject to and must comply with. Here's the thing. Even if such compliance means a proposed project will be less dense than 15 units per acre. So it makes me think that, all right, if you rezone an area that's a wetland or that includes wetlands, you can count it in your 15 units. And as long as your zoning rules with your setbacks and your heights and your FARs are all 15 units per acre, if the wetland constraints mean you can't build that much, that's okay. Isn't that how you'd read that?
Yeah, but that's very.
No, but it's not developable land.
Right.
I know.
So you're not
I
counting.
think it's just saying if you have developable land next to wetlands within a district, you can still build on the developable land, even though you're not going to get ultimately the 15 per acre that you need, but you can still use it and count it.
Right. So I think this is part of the other bigger
They're
picture.
They're trying to make it
more
more flexible so that
Right.
communities can use what they have.
right, to get to their 15 units.
But
per
I
acre
think that we
gross.
wouldn't want to attempt to include wetlands just to allow
Maybe, yeah.
areas of lower density, because that certainly doesn't.
Yeah,
we
just
don't
some phony thing. No, they
Yeah,
don't want you to do that.
And you
Yeah.
still have to, I think at the end of the day, you still have to meet the overall average or gross density. So even if some pieces of this are less than 15, I don't think they're saying that you get a mulligan
Yeah.
for not reaching your 15 gross units per acre gross.
You're
right.
right.
I
On
think
reading this, yeah, I'm reading this again. That's what I'm concluding, that a particular project, see, it uses the word project, any multifamily housing produced within the district, even if the compliance means a proposed project will be less dense than 15 units.
Right.
Okay, so your whole district still has to be 15 units, but a particular project doesn't have to be.
Right, which means other projects are greater than 15.
But have to be bigger. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's all in the balance.
And we already talked about how you can't have bedroom limits. So
Okay.
that's what I thought were the important things.
Yep.
And I think, as we go through our other documents, I made some notes saying, are we going to be able to do this? Is this going to work under a BTA guideline? So, when we get to that. So I've been doing all the talking, or most of the talking. So why don't I turn the gavel over?
Okay.
This committee doesn't really have a chair.
Yes, sure. I will. I think the next thing on the agenda would be to take on the roadmap. And so what I've done is I put a side by side up here.
Yeah.
Hold on.
And to what extent, I wasn't able to print out what Emily sent. She was commenting on particular sections. And
Yes, she was, and I have it here side by side. So,
did she put her comments right in a document?
She did not, no, but I have.
Oh, you have. You're wonderful.
Yeah. So what we do here now is on the left side is the latest one, which took away. You'll see here. This is the one with the three opening goals. Those are now gone. So the left side is the document that took away the things that we moved into our other text, including the first three goals, and then all the things at the end, which were more general. They weren't.
And I know you put the old items. You put the old numbers in the margins. So
yes.
That,
yes. So the left document has everything you need, and there's a left reference, column. And then I started to answer some of her questions, or clarifications with the text at the bottom. So we can go through this, pretty quickly. And so, can everybody see? I know it's really small.
Do we need to look at them side by side, or shall we just look at the new document?
We can do that. We can definitely do that.
Yeah, I've got a printout.
Then we can make it a little bit bigger, perhaps.
Yep. Come on.
Yeah. Just look, and I've got just look at the new document that you prepared with the new numbers and everything. Yeah.
Good idea.
And I've got a printout I can look at, but of the old document.
Yeah. So if you, so her numbers are referenced on the left. But these are the points. And if we want to read her document, we can.
Let's go with your interpretation.
Okay. So basically, her suggestions are in the teardown conversation. I think she's saying that we really do want to drill into specific thresholds, and I think we all agree we're going to want to look at how we make adjustments to some of the dimensional requirements, the setbacks, the FAR calculations. We threw tree removal in here, but it's really a separate piece. So I think we talk about the limitations of what you can build, and that's comes from that large house review and the calculations, as far as I know.
Could we do it this way?
Yeah.
Could we go down each item, and when we get to the items that Emily wants to see changes to, then we talk about the change she wants? Because
that's what we're doing.
Oh, okay.
So in 4, she's saying additional setback requirements, suggested tree removal bylaw, meet with brokers and stakeholders to minimize the sale of modest homes that are still livable. So there's a lot of stuff in there, right? She's not necessarily staying exactly on target here, but the point she's making, in addition to what we already have in here, is do we do anything to try and influence or affect the sale of these smaller, more modest homes?
What item on the list does that pertain to?
Well, she's added that issue to this discussion of teardowns. So what she's saying here is,
We already
No.
had an item on tear downs, right? Oh,
Yeah.
there it is. Oh, it's, excuse me. It's right
Yeah.
up there at the beginning.
It's here.
Number one,
Yeah.
that used to be number 4. There, okay. I
Yes.
just needed to be directed. Okay. Right.
So what she's saying is consider the control mechanisms for selling modest
Oh, yeah.
homes on the market and versus being torn down.
Hmm.
So that's
All right. Well,
and that's a question, right? I mean, I think
Yeah.
if we talked about this, the question is, how do you create is there a mechanism that says all the houses? So one to point of that was brokers. Is there a relationship with brokers, right?
it seems, I don't know what the town could do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do brokers
I mean, it's a legitimate question to ask, but I'm having trouble envisioning how that would
right.
occur.
Yeah. Because most of these are rezoning initiatives. And is there a section at the end where we put things kind of like that? Where we're talking about ideas that we should pursue, but aren't really immediately measurable things.
Well, additionally, aren't we supposed to be focusing on zoning right now? Or are we?
Yes.
So
Yes.
this is not
right.
part of zoning. So I think we need
Right.
to keep our focus narrow, or we're
Yeah.
never going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Yep.
That. Yeah.
So
it's a good idea.
it's a legitimate idea that we could consider. I just don't think this is the appropriate
Yeah.
place for that
Right.
conversation.
Well, it's not.
And I think what we have is list of
Yep.
initiatives
We've got to
for
stay
further,
focused, or we're going to
like
be
we've
here
got
forever.
a list of initiatives for further study that begins on the second page. And something like that could be there, maybe. Kind of a further study thing.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well,
Yep. That's fine.
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's keep going. So 5, which is her 2,
Mhm.
she wants to require ADUs be within FAR and all setbacks. Yes, I think that's obvious. We're
Yeah.
not going to have them be any different. I don't know what she means. Need restrictions that don't prompt additional knockdowns or additions that change the nature of denser neighborhoods. I think she's wondering if people would knock down buildings to be able to build an ADU or do something with an ADU. But I think it all comes back to the first question, which is in producing an ADU, you're not going to be able to do anything that wouldn't be according to the zoning or setbacks or dimensional limitations anyway. So
That's right.
I don't.
So if a person wants to tear down the existing house and put up a house that has an ADU in it, there's nothing to stop that, even under our current ADU requirement.
Right. So long as
You
the
need a
house
special permit, but yeah.
Right. Okay. So moving on. So 6, respond to the final version of DHCD guidelines. Yes, we're doing that. Interestingly, she's bringing up, we don't want knockdowns in neighborhoods too, so developers can squeeze 6 units into a single family neighborhood. Consider requiring that housing built under the new Mbta guidelines have some affordability component.
We're not proposing any rezoning
Anything
of
in-
single family to comply with the MBTA guidelines. We do have a couple of proposals along Highland Avenue, don't we, that talk about changing single residence to general residence?
Yeah.
But that's
Yes.
not to meet that's just because we think that might be appropriate for that area.
Yes.
Well,
Uh-huh.
both.
I think it's a separate issue whether we're going to go beyond and look at other. Yeah, I think in the context of this point,
Right. We're not.
we're
going there.
not right.
Mhm. One thing I want to say about, which is the new number 3 and the old number 6.
Yep.
The in parenthesis 20% bus 27
Right.
whatever acres,
That's
that you can
gone.
just delete that.
Yes, we can do that now.
Good point.
Yeah. And then, although it's not the comments, I'd like to make a comment myself about our new item number 4, consider options for Needham Center Business District. And number 6, improve development opportunities for mixed use. I think, is this the place that we need to say and introduce multifamily housing by right as a standalone use? Because if we're going to,
because of the,
yeah, but if we're going to address that at all, I mean, alternatively, we could say, well, we can find our 50 acres some other way. But if we really need that acreage, we're going to have to address that. And I suppose it's these items are the place to address it.
well, potentially, but since we haven't really reviewed the document, maybe we could
Right.
just put an asterisk in there to remind us.
Yep.
We won't meet again unless we decide we want to before the 17th when our report is due.
Well, if it takes, I mean,
Is the asterisk good
I
enough?
don't think we should rush. Like, we could push things back a smidge if we have to. The guidelines just got released.
Oh, I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
We
It's a
need to go
challenge.
over them thoroughly. So that's a really important portion of this housing plan. I
Yeah.
think we need a little bit more time. We need to take a little more time.
Well, let me,
not.
let me at least as we go along, this may be the only 2, number 4 and number 6, where there should be some note about the MBTA guidelines requiring multifamily standalone by right. Note that, whatever, or something. And it isn't just so the 3 of us remember this, it's so
Yep.
that when the other members of the Housing Plan Working Group read it, they understand that.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
And the same, we'll get, when we get to number 11, there's another issue, but right now. I'm good.
So she asked, in 4, old
Mhm.
7,
Mhm.
she was, remember, I think we were talking about this ourselves, that we need to think about where we would have her question. I'll read her question. Modest density increases won't make them economically more viable. That's her opinion. Do we want to choose areas where we would be okay with some height and real density? So again, I think this is very highly tailored to town locations where you could do things like this. Witness the conversation around 888 Great Plain, where people are concerned that you had this little old house and now you're putting a 4 or 5 story building in its place. And-
4 stories.
So, yeah, so I think the point of this is to say, we need to think about, if we're looking at reaching these gross densities, and if we think there are places in town where there are potential increases of another story or so to some of these areas, then we should be looking at that carefully and deciding that, because it does change the economics to have some of that increased density.
But
So-
remember, the Hackney Graymont rezoning went down in flames. It didn't even get 50% town meeting vote. And all they were proposing was 5 stories.
Yes, but that's also Hartney Graymont, which was, out on its own and next to a neighboring or
There
a
were
neighborhood.
Yeah, there were multiple flaws with that project.
Yeah,
I don't think it
yeah.
was simply
I
the
think-
density.
I think we're just saying, within reason, we need to analyze what areas of town can take a little bit more density or not, and then figure out how we want to organize that and make that clear. I think clarity is going to
Okay.
become very
An issue along the same lines of considering different densities for different places is we were talking about a couple of the overlay districts. Needham Center overlay, I think it's the B zone that's around the town hall,
yes.
and the Garden Street district, which is across from SRB zone. And I think originally I was thinking, I guess we have to, allow 4-story buildings there too. But I'm actually a little concerned about that. I wonder if we could achieve the densities we want with the changes, like allowing in the other zones, the Needham Center overlay A, which is along Great Plain Ave, but not right around the town hall. And especially Chestnut Street. If we, have the by right 4 stories, can we achieve what we need to do without touching overlay B and Garden Street overlay?
Well, I think overlay B is different. I would say Garden Street, you could argue, is stepping down towards the neighborhood, but on around town green, I would absolutely argue that there's enough dimension around that green and space to get a little more height in there would be actually a good thing. So, adding a
Okay.
story there, I mean, those are really problematic. To be able to build on top of existing buildings is a very rare occurrence.
Yeah.
And to be able to do that with the kind of land ownership to make that a viable project, I think is incredibly challenging. So I think there's some merits to make it worthwhile someone considering doing that if there's that added height.
So we'll continue to propose that
Yeah.
as we have.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
But
it's
maybe back off on Garden Street, maybe.
yeah, I think we agreed. I think we all agreed, actually, when we first talked about this, that Garden Street is a step down, so that you could say one side of that zone is different, right? It's towards Town Hall, it's one side, and towards the neighborhood, it's down a story.
Right. Well, when
Well-
we look at the map, I just want to make
Yeah.
sure we're actually making that distinction.
Yes.
Okay. So, all right.
yeah. So her next issue is the 9, which was previously 6. And so my thought on this, without you guys having a chance to talk about this with you guys, I put in some notes here as a response to her questions when she's saying what kind of incentives. So we were saying improve development opportunities for mixed use along major corridors, Chestnut, Highland, Great Plain, and incorporate density bonuses for increased affordability, and consider incentives for consolidating parcels to promote larger developable sites for mixed use multifamily projects. So I think we like the we agreed, I think, that that was all a good intention. And she's asking, what do you mean by incentives? And I was wondering if we might, for consolidation of parcels, you might give them tax incentives, or you might give them a fee reduction on the projects, development fees and approval fees and so on. Give them a somewhat of a discount for volume, let's just say, right? So if somebody's going to want to go ahead and assemble something to be able to make a bigger project, they should, there could be some incentive for them to do that, which could mean a tax break, or some reduction in their development fees. So I'm just curious if you guys had any thoughts of your own on how we might craft incentives. Obviously, there potentially also density and height bonuses, but
I
So
think we have to,
I think that that's outside the bounds here. I think we work with the economic development team for economic development, and we stick to zoning here. So if you want to make some incentives that are, FAR based or whatever, then we put them in here, and otherwise we don't have that discussion about incentives here.
yeah, because I
Financial
thought you were
incentives.
talking about incentives that would actually be in our zoning bylaw.
they could
Yeah.
be.
Because
That's the kind of
Yeah.
incentives I thought we're talking about.
Yes. So the other set of assumptions or other possibilities were height, density, if you were to do potentially greater affordable proportion of units, or if you were to create smaller workforce units. Those are the things that we know are in high demand. In other words, we would disincentivize making lots of luxury large units.
Well,
Right.
I think we're going to run into problems with that, because if we actually
You're
do
saying it's
incorporate that,
MBTA?
it's against the MBTA. Like, for
Yeah.
example, I think right now we should delete in number 6 and incorporate density bonuses for increased affordability. They're not going to let us go above 10%.
So we can lay special permits on top of the MBTA zoning areas, right? So long as the base zoning allows what the MBTA guidelines state it must, we could still have special permitting over and above.
Oh, I suppose so. You mean as long as we
So
meet the
if they
50
want-
units per acre
Yeah, so long as the
requirement,
base zoning,
we could allow 20 units if they did this and that, you mean?
you could do that by special permit, because I'm not sure that you could. I don't know. I'm feeling a little. I'm not sure what basis I have for this, but I feel like putting some of these add-ons into the base code is maybe a little dicey, but that seems like a special permit situation to me.
Yeah, I if I understand what you're saying, Heidi, I think you're right that if we have base zoning that allows multifamily development at 15 units per acre, we can add on to that incentives for having more units per acre than that
But we'd want
by
size on it.
special permit, because we've
special
already
permit.
met the 15. Yeah, we could.
So we can talk about that some more. So we'll say that this is bonuses based on by special permit.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely think that we need to talk about, financial incentives, but
Yeah.
I think that that's a different discussion than the one we're having here.
And I think that if we
And
want
it needs to involve more people, that,
Yeah.
and we
no,
could
no,
put
agree.
that, we could put something like that in that section that says further study.
Yep.
Yeah.
That reflects the fact that people are, members of our committee are interested in it, and, further study. Why not?
Okay.
So now we're on the next page, are we? Or- I was hoping we'd end by 8:30, but I know I've been doing a lot of talking, so I'm not helping with that.
So yeah, let's get this done here. So I'll just leave this here for conversation.
So-
Have any of you made any other comments to this content? Because I'm just going to skip through all of these other
yes.
ones, and we'll go to the ones where
Y-
Emily's team was making comments.
Yes, I think we have to look at number 11. It has refers to 12.5%.
Right. It's got to go down to 10.
And we at least have to nod to the districts that are we're counting on to meet MBTA requirements can't have more than 10%. I don't know that we want to be under 12.5% completely, but would have to in these districts. So it's just a matter of rewording the number 11.
Yep.
Right. 10% unless pre-existing at a higher
Right.
percentage.
Yeah. And then on the numbers 14 and 15, we talk only about mixed use development. If we're talking about rezoning these parking lots so that they can be included and meet the MBTA requirements, it would have to be more than mixed use.
But we can't rezone the Hersey Station parking lot. We don't own that.
You can rezone, you always rezone land that you don't own.
I think that's just a question of what's the appetite to have a conversation with them about doing that.
You know what? You're right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thinking
So
about that swap they did.
I don't know whether we just want to leave it alone, mixed use development, because that's what we'd envision for that site. We don't envision multifamily housing. Whether or not, I mean, it meets MBTA is irrelevant.
Well, no, I think it's mixed use multifamily.
Whether we evaluate the feasibility of mixed use
Yeah, so that
and or multifamily development.
Yep.
All right, so adding in both 14 and 15, those two uses, mixed use and or multifamily development. Okay. Those were the only comments I had on this page.
Okay. So this was an interesting question. Her comments were basically going from a single family to a two family. It needs more discussion. And so her comment was, so if we're saying, consider allowing two family homes by right in single family zones, and how to implement, whether there's a local rezoning near transit or more uniformly across the district, right? Which is, two very different things. Her comment was, this may not have support of the entire, if this should be discussed by the group at large. If two family by right, we have knockdowns galore and it will change the whole feeling of certain neighborhoods. Even older homes will get knocked down so the developers could build two new ones. That's a question whether that's going to happen the way she predicts it. And I don't know. I mean, I think when you think about the overarching change of a zoning impact, it takes decades to see that sort of thing happen. And it's hard to predict. So I was simply saying, I think it would be worth thinking through more what the pros and cons are for doing this, and if we can predict at all what kinds of effects this might have on tearing down buildings. I think here's what I was thinking, it related to our discussion about FAR limitations and kind of cramping down a little bit on the maximum build out of our large house zoning, that if someone, so I would here's a hypothetical. If our current dimensional requirements for the large house review allows basically 6 and 6, like 6 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms, or 5 and 5. It's something crazy, right? They're huge. And that's basically what's allowed when you do the math. And so you're basically getting very big houses. So one thought was maybe the maximum house size that would be allowed, maybe the one that we're currently using, or maybe we tamp it down a little bit, is if you build a 2-family. So you would be able to build 2 units at that maximum FAR density if they're actually creating a second unit, right? If you're going to be a single family, then you are at a lower threshold of FAR. So you're essentially giving some incentive to say maybe you could build 2 families instead of 1, and you're going to get a little bit larger build out. Because in fact, builders may make more money if they sell 2 units than 1. So that's just a thought about the ways we may be able to manipulate some of these considerations for single family, 2-family, and for tear downs. What do you guys think about that?
How could we narrow down that 1512 item? Evaluate the feasibility of mixed use with affordable housing. Oh no, not that. I mean,
There's
12 up
2-family
there.
and single family.
Yeah, that one. Because we are specifically proposing, when we get to the map, some rezonings. Is there a way of narrowing that down so that we're only talking about within along major corridors, such as Highland Avenue? We're talking about doing that in those locations, because we are talking about that.
Yep.
Yeah,
it could be along major avenues, like West Street, Honeywell, things that are coming in and out of denser neighborhoods that already have some 2-family and multifamily on them.
Yeah.
So, again, I think those are interesting conversations, and we need to look at the map maybe and start thinking about that in more detail.
And you said in your wording here in number 12 there, it says whether as local rezoning near transit or more uniformly across districts, more egalitarian, less, that may be off-putting because maybe local rezoning, such rezoning near transit, and that's all we want to say.
Well, here's my pushback on that. When you think about what we're doing for the response to the fact that zoning is by right racially segregating, right? If we are saying that as a town, we want to address the historic inequality of our zoning, the history of racial segregation or economic segregation, however you want to parse it, and say every part of this town needs to contribute something. So if we're going to say everything we're going to do about zoning changes and density is going to be right around the Mbta stuff and the currently the denser zones, then that to me is a little skewed to one side. It's saying basically everything we're going to do here is going to just affect certain areas that are already X. But if we say there are pieces of the zoning changes that are happening that will influence the entire town, so all of the town will be contributing to the extent that it's possible for these changes to create change, that doesn't mean you're going to get multifamily built all over town. It means you're going to get other kinds of density, lower density. Maybe it's just the 2-family change from single family that allows a little bit more density, a little bit more opportunity, that coupled with ADUs, right? So if you say ADUs and single family to 2-family across the board, no limits about where we do it. We're going to say this is a uniform change. This means the entire town is contributing to righting the wrong of zoning segregation. This is the Needham's commitment.
Yeah, well,
right?
okay.
That's
Well, it's only in there for
challenging conversation.
furthest, it's only in there for furthest study.
Yes,
So,
yes, but I'm just
yeah,
saying, that's the point of that comment, is that
yeah,
we need to understand both sides of this. What does it mean to say we're going to do this very local and just affect the things that are right around the stations, or we're going to come up with something else that is a bigger, more evenly distributed change that affects
yeah.
everybody equally. Everybody has a chance to have that change to that, or that change to that. And that's,
Well, I
but it's
want,
modest.
when we get to the discussion of this with the larger housing plan working group, I want to be ready to make changes that they ask for and not fight them about it. That's all.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah,
And I mean, I'd want some kind of far and dimensional limits. Like we have to do dimensional limitation before we allow for that kind of development. Because you're just gonna, that would just make it worse. The tear down situation.
you might even put down, consider allowing small 2-family homes.
Yeah, I can't see doing that unrestricted. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, some word that
I think
responds.
the thing that I'm thinking though here is that if you incorporate that change into this plan with and mix it in with the DHCD guidelines that we need to comply with, the whole thing is going to go down in flames.
Mm,
And we're not going to get the DHCD guidelines passed.
mm.
So
That's what I'm worried about.
if we need
too.
to get this passed, we need to do this and then that.
Yeah.
If we as a group, as a community decide we want to do it, which I'm, open to talking about certainly, but I think if we combine it with this, it's never going to get past town meeting.
So tell me what you're saying you want to change here.
I'm saying I want to put it truly into future study and not try to get it.
Well, that's what
I
it
think
is.
it's really going to
it's in
undermine
further
our
study.
ability to get, but I think I just think it's going to undermine our ability to get this DHCD stuff through.
Well, I don't know if everything
Even
we're doing,
to Heidi, even to put it in the further study section, you think so?
I think that's what's going to get all the attention. It's going to suck all the oxygen out of the room.
Mm.
I mean, I'm not saying it's not valid. I just think that it will be a huge distractor.
Oh, yeah, we do have, as you point out,
okay, I'm fine.
we
I
have
think,
that big list at the end, which is kind of a mishmash of things, I don't know.
okay, moving on.
Okay,
Just to clear, I just think it's a political issue versus a zoning issue.
Mm.
And maybe
agreed.
it shouldn't be that way, but I think in reality, that's what it is. So.
mhm. And I think
but zoning is politics.
Yeah.
To be
And
clear.
That's why I would say make it part 2.
Yeah.
the comment about 70%, the local.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think that has to be respected too. It's a legitimate point of view.
But I would argue that we need to understand which is going to give us the greater opportunity for diversity for the community. I don't necessarily agree that 70% Needham centric is. I think everybody is pushing back on these and making them lower because there's a desire to have more influence from greater,
Where
more
does that
influx.
come from? Do we know? Like, what is that based on?
It comes out of 40B. 40B allows a local preference for the affordable units, and they do typically allow 70%. And Newton did a study recently, a very good study. I mean, you read that study, didn't you, Oscar?
Yes. Yes.
And it really does have an impact on the diversity of those who will finally
To-
get the units.
To not
Mhm.
have it high, they went to 25% or something, right?
Yeah.
Or did they wipe it out completely?
I
think
don't
they went,
remember what
went
they
down to,
did. I just
Yeah.
know the study, but I don't
Yep.
know what happened after the study. But the study was very, very impressive on the effect that,
Right.
on the bad effect, if your goal is diversity, of racial diversity, of having the local preference.
Yes. So anyway, that was the point of this. We need a greater the working group needs to come together on that and talk about it.
And it's
Um,
also people whose children go to school through the Metco program are also included.
Yeah.
In the local, but you don't have to get
Um,
into all that detail, but it's a fact, you know.
So we're getting to the end
Okay.
here. I think we're getting
Yep.
close to the end. So down here, these are all finance based. And so a little clarity on this. I think, Jean, this was another cutoff paragraph on 27.
Yeah, and you fixed it perfectly. That's the way it should have been.
Huh? No.
It-
This is a different one. I didn't
Oh.
catch this one. This is continue to
Yeah.
advocate for 22% commitment of
Oh,
community
the
preservation.
word
Act funds.
"in," I think the word "in" is just doesn't belong
right.
there. It's a typo.
Oh, so we just take it out.
Yeah,
Got
exactly.
it.
Mhm.
All right. Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Big X. Okay.
Okay.
31. Invest ARPA. She's just saying time is now to do that.
Mm,
The
That's just a
funds
comment.
are
Yeah.
flowing. Yep. 35 CPA funds for group homes that serve people with disabilities. So her comment was, keep in mind that all affordable, even senior for young adults, even senior for young or too young, I don't know what she means by that.
Mhm.
Housing provides this preference for people with disabilities, but that's not the real point of this. So my point here was, I'm channeling that CPAC report, which was saying there are different, so I'm just saying, consider other housing types like co-living or assisted co-living, not assisted living, but assisted co-living, as suggested in CPAC report, which was basically describing their 3 different kinds of conditions where you have very high functioning kids with disabilities who could live by themselves basically, or they might need a check-in, like once a day. And then there are those who absolutely need some kind of assistance or management or check-in on a regular basis. And then obviously there are those who are disabled and need more physically disabled and need more accessibility. So I think what we're saying here is not just quote disabilities, or it's really about the different kinds of housing conditions that we need to think about. And so I said group homes, but in fact it's more, I think, even more diverse and more creative than that. But it's just, so do you guys agree with this, to just say this? See, available to acquire property for group homes that serve people with disabilities. I'm basically trying to figure out how we respond to the fact that we have a lot of our kids who are aging out and from our families in Needham and they want their children to be living in Needham, and they want to be in familiar areas. They want to be in areas where they can walk and or take, bike or something, or they're either in the more urban setting. They're not out,
Yeah.
at Militia Heights,
Could you look? Can I look again at what her wording was that
Yes.
she wanted?
So
Consider other housing types like co-living and assisted co-living.
She is saying her comment
Yeah.
was, keep in mind that all affordable, even senior for younger adults, which I don't understand what the wording means there. I think there's a typo. Housing provides a preference for people with disabilities.
I think what she's talking about is housing limited to persons over a certain age. They have to nevertheless let younger people in if they're disabled. My own mother benefited from a program like that when she wasn't yet, whatever it was, 62, you had to be. So I think that's what she's talking about. But I don't know that we necessarily need to get into that. But this other concepts that she's talking about, I'm afraid I don't understand them. If they were in the CPAC report, maybe you could be vague and say, and other concepts as in the CPAC report or something.
I can do that. I can do that.
Yeah,
Sure.
rather than,
Get too specific.
I hate
Okay.
to be
That's fine.
recommending something that I don't understand.
Well, I think there are lots of different kinds of housing conditions.
Yeah.
Group homes is kind of a thing. It's a term,
Yeah,
but it's
right.
really different. It's group homes or co-living. Maybe I'll just say that. Different kinds of housing for multifamily or different kinds of group or co-living
Yeah, well,
settings
disabled people can live in multifamily housing.
with different
Like
levels of,
you can, like my sister she first lived in an apartment. Once she went from the group home with all the training on how to live independently, then she lived in a regular apartment building with a roommate, with staff coming in a few times a week to see how they were doing.
right,
And maybe
right.
that's what they're talking about.
right. Okay.
Mhm.
So,
Like assisted co-living, that might be
Yeah.
what they're talking about, roommate type of thing. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, why don't we just add it? Yeah.
Okay, I think the last one was provide training funding. Yes, we got rid of the doubling of that, and then everything else got moved. So that's the end of
Okay.
that.
All right. The thing that I think is hard to follow begins with current number 34, because all the way from 34 to 38 have to do with why rental housing. And it's not clear. It's almost like they should be like sub paragraphs, but that doesn't fit with our format.
So
Favor rental housing which targets the need. Rental housing also leverages other funds, rental housing also, et cetera, et cetera. That's what those paragraphs are about. But it's if you don't make it clear, I don't think understand what it's about.
So are you suggesting that we take this as maybe this is an action items or needs to be in the chart? You're saying do a summary of the different kinds of approaches to funding?
Well, I don't know how to present it. It could still be number 34, but then it would maybe be a really long number 34 that has A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Because it's all reasons why we should favor rental housing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's related to that, yes.
Yeah.
Which is why it's, which is interesting. This is why we were getting the recommendation from Karen that we are flipping the ratio of what we're going to be built, what she recommends we're targeting as numbers of units or percentage of units. She wants to do the 80% rental and the 20% owner occupied versus where we are with the basic housing stock in town.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is based on the need that we have, which is for people who are needing more affordable units. So there's some subsidy there, and so you need sources of funding for that. So
this is all a rationale for that. All of these sections that I mentioned, 34 to 38.
Yep.
But I think it's just not explained well enough. We're talking about rental housing, the advantages of rental housing.
So let's see how we come out.
So Heidi, do you agree that we should just be reformatted in some way? Those sections?
I'm really not sure. I'm not sure how to make that clearer.
Why don't we leave this for now until we get feedback, and maybe Karen will have some thoughts. She's going to reorganize
Karen's
all of this.
Going to rework it.
She's putting this into different ways. She's categorizing it by subgroup and then by time, as opposed to what Emily was saying, which is just do everything by time. Okay, I think it'll be parse it a little differently, and so let Karen do that, And I can give her some of the suggestions that we've already made.
Okay,
So,
give her that suggestion then. So we're all set with we've got through this, right?
yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
so I have up here,
Oh, so we got two more things. We've got the introductory text.
Yep.
And the map.
the maps are gonna, they're, I don't know how much detail you guys want to get into those tonight. It's getting late. And I also
know.
think there's a lot of that detail in those maps
So we
that
need
would
to look at the,
probably,
we need
yeah,
to look at the new guidelines to make sure that the maps are gonna be correct, right?
to a certain extent, yes. Although I think we're going to get down into the next level of study for MBTA is, yeah, where we're going to be able to assemble the right kind of density of the in the districts, the parcels, right size parcels, contiguous parcels. That's a whole nother level of study, but
well, Heidi sent a couple of changes just to page
Very
1, I
minor.
think.
for
Yeah.
this, yeah, no, I've already
Yeah.
picked those up.
And you already picked those up. I noticed that.
Yeah.
And then I have some changes, but if I had had the time to actually send them to you, it would be so much easier than going through it and saying, oh, put in this word here and put in that word there.
Well, just send it to me. Yeah, I mean,
All right, I will.
do you want to just read?
Let
Why
me
don't you read
just
them? Yeah,
let
read
me
your
ju-
changes.
let me just see. Some of them go to substance, like on page 3. When we get my comments all have to do with the particular rezonings, and my comments on this document
Oh,
also
okay.
reflect my comments on the map legend.
Okay. Well, this is
So-
the map. These are the list of.
Yeah, they are
yeah.
the map legend.
Okay.
So maybe
Go-
we really
for
need
it.
to talk about them if we're going to deal with the substance.
Well, yeah, let's just
So
do it here then. instead of-
1G, Congregational Church on Great Plain, including former rest home parcel. I really don't think picking that up and making that apartment A1 makes sense. I understand now that the former rest home parcel, they have actually resolved the litigation, and that's going to go forward as a slightly smaller development under 40B.
I'm just going to
from the-
hold on. I'm going to open this up in a different,
Yeah.
and so I can actually put notes on it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Uh,
And reaching out to the Congregational Church way on the edge over there. I don't know. Yeah. So my comments on page 3. Yeah, I think we really have to deal with this tonight, or we're just not gonna.
Yep.
I
Go for
hate
it.
to keep going, but all right. And I really welcome what your thoughts are, because we have to, the three of us here, we have to come to agreement. All right, page 3, apartment A1, IG 1G.
Yep.
Congregational Church on Great Plain, including the former rest home parcel. I mean, I can see the other churches that we included, the Episcopal Church on Highland.
Yep.
And the Baptist Church and the Christian Science Church, because they were helping us extend the area of some zones so that we'd try to meet that 25 acres.
Yes.
But that isn't a factor here. And I just don't see the reason for going way over there.
Oh, well, it's right across from the post office.
It's right across from the post office, and it's next to that group home, or that small home
Right.
that was.
I mean, it actually doesn't. It wouldn't make sense to have, for example, if the church were to come down or go out of business and want to sell it as condos. I mean, just like that is happening on the other end of the street. So why wouldn't we do it here?
June. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to back off that if you both think it's okay.
I also just wouldn't want to see us treat.
Different
Because I think
churches-
this, because I
Different
think this,
churches differently.
yes,
Yeah.
because I think the situations are the same. I think we ought to treat the churches the same.
Okay, and we're doing some proposed rezonings that affect St. Joseph's too, so we're not just picking on the Protestants. Right. Okay.
Yes, we are equal opportunity. Yeah, changing. Yes.
Rezoners, yeah.
So
Rezoners of
on the
yes.
next page, this is so minor, but in the middle of the page, apartment A1, it's off on the alphabet. Alphabetically, it would be small letter O.
No,
Does
I
that
don't-
matter?
No, I got to tell you why I do this. So O's are confusing and L's are confusing. So I never do O's or L's
Okay,
Oh.
okay, good
because
explanation.
they're confused. People think they're a number or they're not a number. So I always do that.
All right, and we can talk about my changes and then I can, and I'm going to cross that one out. And then I can actually send them to you later, just to speed things up. But
Absolutely.
see, the Hartney Graymont site is actually now partly in the Chestnut Street Business / Lower Chestnut Street Overlay District and partly in the SRB district. So I think it's good to make that clear because it's not just in Chestnut Street Business.
Okay.
Okay, so we can make that clear in 1P. Okay, I'll send it.
So
Okay.
rezone Hartley to be apartment 1, which so it's a combination of Chestnut Street business overlay and SRB.
Yes. Yep. And as I say, tomorrow I'll sit down and send you the wording.
And so we're going
then-
to make it just apartment 1.
Yeah,
But
that's
it's
the
more
idea.
complicated. You're saying it's more complicated. It's not swapping.
Yeah, I mean, I
one for
did-
one.
Because the heading says now zones Chestnut Street Business Overlay District, and it's not.
Right. But I
I
can
mean,
make, yeah. I can-
Unless we were only talking about that part. But we'll be talking about the whole parcel, not just half of it.
Yeah.
Okay. On 2B down below, Hillside Avenue Business. We should say with dimensional regulations. I don't know. I actually do know because I looked it up in the zoning bylaw. This currently has the dimensional regulations for the A1 district, the Hillside Avenue Business. It has it. And you say increase, and it shouldn't say increase. It should just say Hillside Avenue Business with dimensional regulations. Because they wouldn't be increasing them. I mean, that's the new development that went in on Honeywell Street.
Oh, okay,
That's,
gotcha. Here, sorry.
that's
Yeah,
the
so I'm just-
same dimensional regulations as A1. And then 2C, it's neighborhood business district, just the word business. And same thing with 2C.
Neighborhood.
Business
Business, yep.
district. And you might say Great Plain Avenue, rather than just Great Plain. And then 3A, I thought it's helpful to nail that down and say uses allowed by right in the industrial district between Hillside Avenue and the Mbta right of way. Because that's the only industrial district we're talking about. Just adding A1 as an allowed use. So may as well be specific. There are other industrial
Oh, this
districts in town, but we're not talking about them.
This should be a district. I got
Yeah.
rid of all the zones. Yes.
It's add multifamily housing to the uses allowed by right in the industrial district between Hillside Avenue and the MBTA right of way.
It's 3A.
Sorry,
And-
where are you?
3A.
Yes, add multifamily housing. Sorry, let me just copy that text and do it. You're gonna send me the text.
Yeah, I will. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's the idea. And then moving on to the next page.
Hang on one second. Let
Um,
him just finish this note before.
Yep, go ahead.
move
So
on.
add multifamily housing. Say it again.
The use is
okay.
allowed by right in the
Oh, wait a
industrial
minute.
district between. She's got,
Where's my page here? 3.
between where?
I'm just fumbling with my page, hard copy here. So it would say, in the industrial district between Hillside Avenue and the MBTA right-of-way. I mean, you could say along Hillside Avenue, but that might be confusing. Specifically, it is between Hillside Avenue and the MBTA right-of-way.
Okay.
Then number 4, do we want to, want to add right in the introductory paragraph here about the multifamily housing as an allowed use standing alone? Amend center business, Chestnut Street business and AB Square business. And a center business, you should say, and its overlays, because you say Chestnut Street overlay, but center business also has overlays.
It does. Okay.
Yeah, that's Needham Center. It has, we were just talking
No,
about
no,
it.
no,
It
this
has,
is center business is different from Needham's is different, right? Isn't it center business? Is center business Needham's center? Is that right? Okay.
yeah, that's what you were talking about. Where else would you be talking about and calling it center
Needham Center,
business?
yeah, I guess you're right. So
Yeah,
center
we look at
overlay.
the,
Okay. Yeah, you're right. You're
look
right.
at the
You're right.
use districts.
Yes.
Yeah, it's called center business, right?
Yes.
So it's a center, you could say amend current center business and its overlays, because there are 3, and then
Okay.
go on. And we have to decide if you're going to put in here, and I haven't got exact wording, but to allow the multifamily use, standalone multifamily uses by right. And in fact, you do say that, to allow multifamily by right. But I think
And we actually
we've
we wanna-
really
We did,
been,
yeah, we,
we want to do that.
yeah, we do.
Actually.
But previously we've only talked about mixed use. So do we want to clarify that we're talking about both multifamily by right, both multifamily standalone and mixed use with multifamily, or just leave it the way it is?
well, do you have to call it out?
Mm.
I mean, both are allowed, I mean, whatever, I guess it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I'll see. I'll tell you right now, this list can't
Yeah.
get longer.
Yeah,
Doesn't-
that's true.
it
It
doesn't
won't fit in the, it won't
So-
fit in the, yep. All right, let's leave it alone.
So, but we can,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll see what I can do.
And
Okay.
we talked, I thought maybe we'd, again, take out the 4D, the Garden Street Overlay District, and leave that alone.
I don't know what its current dimensional requirements or allowances are. Is it 2-story or is it 3-story?
It's 3-story, or it might be 2.5, actually.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
can,
the half
can-
stories, I'm just,
I think
wouldn't-
I've got it.
I'd say
Where
let's leave it in there just to keep our eye on it so we can look at it and not just
Yeah,
take it off without
Okay.
analyzing it.
center business, Garden Street Overlay. 3-story, it is 3 stories
It
by
is.
special permit now.
So it has to be by right.
It has to be by right. Yeah,
So we'll leave it in here,
but presently it's 3
we-
stories by,
but we do want to change it to go by right. So that's why it's in here. So we're changing it to allow
okay,
multifamily by right.
okay. Mhm.
Okay.
Fine,
So-
and then all right, we're okay with that. Now, I realize it's a difficulty because how are we going to make this summary of zoning considerations any longer? But this is my last comment on number 6, rezone the designated residential areas. There are 4 of them: Hunting Road, Greendale Avenue, Brookside Road, and Rolling Lane, I think. I guess we can't list them here
I think,
because,
yeah, I know, we should actually list them, and we could list them in this document.
and we could list them in this
And not
document.
have it, and not do it on the map.
Yeah, I
Because the
think
map
it'd
is
be a
gonna
good
show
idea.
up there. So
But-
we can do things here that we don't do on the map.
And then I just had a point about the map.
Yeah.
I thought that you had showed me a plan that had a line drawn very carefully around the Rolling Lane area, but this map that we're working from now doesn't have that. Let's see. Just look at the large one. When you go up there,
Oh, zoom in.
yeah, number 6, the one that's number 6, way up near the Wellesley line. There are 2 number 6s up at the Wellesley line.
Sorry.
Didn't you have a plan that really showed the particular area?
You're looking for which area?
Way up by the Wellesley line. In the SRA zone,
This guy.
way over there. Even, yeah, a little bit over from there, a
This
little
guy.
bit west. There we go. There we are. See,
Yeah.
this has these big circles. I thought
Mhm.
you had a map with a smaller, more carefully defined areas that you had showed
Yeah,
us.
well, I showed you, this one is just bubbles it, and then this one shows the actual map change,
Oh,
right?
which one? The big one?
This one.
Is that, oh, that's Z5? Oh, okay, let me
Yeah.
look at that. All right, that's good enough. That's right. I failed to notice it. Let me look.
So what I did here was on the ones that actually literally change the map, right? And show you what the actual looks like in the bubbles, right? So there's this one, and then there's all the other ones are kind of easy. This one's a little trickier because I was picking and choosing which side of the street I was gonna actually switch over.
Yeah,
So
but I have Z5 that I printed out from the latest thing you sent, and it doesn't have any. Are you looking, is this map Z5 right here?
hold on.
It puts Z5 up again.
C5.
This is Z5.
So it's either showing with
I
the
don't-
color change
oh,
or
I
it's
don't-
not
what-
showing with the color change. This is the most recent one. This is the one I just
Okay.
sent everybody.
But this has those big circles, right? It doesn't narrow it down to show the particular
It does.
blocks and streets. Where's the line?
Did you see the change in color? So this yellow is SRA and the white or color is SRB.
Oh, it's a change in color. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking for a line.
It's too crazy. I couldn't put a line around it.
Yeah.
it's-
Okay.
It's
Okay, now
weird.
I understand. I'm
So
sorry.
that's
to
why
be
I
so
just put
dense.
the ovals on it so that you could say, hey, here's where it is, right? And so when you go back and forth between these 2 documents, right, this one or
Okay.
this
Then
one,
this,
you
so as we're
just see,
talking about this, there
right.
was one other that I couldn't see the boundary, and
Okay.
that's 1H, which is
Rosemary.
Rosemary Street up to Hillside Avenue to include Library, Christ Episcopal, and
Yep.
Sudbury Farms. I thought you had a little square around
Here.
that, but I don't see
this
it.
one. Oh, I'll go to the next one. Sorry. This one. Is this the one you're talking about?
Yeah. I thought
So-
you had a line that was,
So this is a combination of what we're changing from grade. So this is, if you look at it this way, this is the zoning change. This is
So it's
actually
the
the zoning
gray.
change. So there's a gray line in
Oh.
here, right?
Gray
And
swoop.
then, so I'll show you. This is gonna go.
oh, wait a minute. So I'm sorry. I guess I was only looking at the cover map. Which map is that? That's,
This
map.
is the zoom in on, this is Z1.
oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was focusing only on the big map. I just didn't have time to go to the smaller maps I should have.
Yeah, so that's the Z, that shows you the zoning change. This shows
And-
you without the zoning change. So we're
And we're talking
extending.
about Z1, the
One.
Z1 map?
Yes. So this was the hook that grabs the parcel in front of the highland or hillside, and then it goes facing Rosemary, and then you get the library, and then you go across the
But
street to the church.
where's the hook? I
This
mean,
was kind of a hook, this multifamily, if you see the colored version of this, it does this. So you're adding this piece that goes
about-
across, gets the
oh,
church.
yeah.
Right, so you get the library and the church.
but
then you
where
get- and
is,
then- And then
where
you
is
get,
that?
this is the parking lot at Suds.
But which of the plans that were sent to us actually shows that?
This is Z1. Z1 in the maps. So there's two sets. There's a set that's the set 2 has the map changes shown, and set 1 just uses the bubbles or the lines,
I must have printed out the wrong set.
right? So you have this.
I don't
this-
have that.
This is
Okay,
this is the set 1. This just doesn't show the change of the zoning maps. It just shows you the area. So it's very,
Ah,
it's
I
very
did
hard.
not
It's
print
hard.
out, so I did not print out set 2. All
It's hard.
right,
Set
I'm
2 is
sorry.
the maps. Yeah.
okay. Set
easy-
2 has those changes carefully
It's a
mapped.
lot. Yeah, it's easier to see.
All right,
It's just nice to be able to compare the two, so
Yeah.
you can say, okay, this is what it looks like now, and here's what it looks like in the future.
Right.
If these are approved.
and I just had a substantive comment about that too. I didn't think we were talking about including Sudbury Farms.
Well, the parking lot is a different zone.
It is a different zone. So
So
that little bit of parking lot across the street from the little bit of, wait a minute
that's the
now,
way I read this. I think this
No.
zone,
this, where you have the bubble that says 1H, that is the Sudbury Farms parking lot.
This is the parking lot.
North of Rosemary Street, and if you were showing set 2, that
is the
shows,
library.
and then see the word Rosemary
Yeah,
just under the industrial zone.
yeah,
That strip is not Sudbury Farms.
no,
That is
I
the
didn't say
front
it
part
was.
of the front part of the area that's developed for industry.
right. There's a parking lot. There's a little office building or something, right?
There's an
a-
office
Yeah.
building, and
Yeah.
then they've got some greenery along the road.
Yeah, yeah. So
That's
that
not,
would be
that's-
beautiful townhouses looking out over the lake.
but it's not Sudbury Farms.
No, I didn't say that. I said this piece is Sudbury Farms parking lot. Right, this
Oh,
is
oh,
Sudbury Farms parking.
Oh, wait, of course, that's the railroad tracks. Across the railroad
And that's
tracks.
the
And if I looked
library.
at your,
And that's the church.
and if I looked at the one that had the line, I'd see that. Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, it's a bunch of stuff in here. And this is the church's parking lot,
Okay.
right?
All
So
right,
this
then
guy owns this piece.
All right.
That's where they do the Christmas trees.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, is that, I think we want to attack these
I
things
think,
with the group, right?
yeah, we do, but I just want to make sure what we between us at it. Oh, the same comment I had on the text applies to little section 3A, add multifamily housing to the uses allowed by right in the industrial district between Hillside Avenue and Mbta right of way. if we can possibly fit. Or you could just say here, in the industrial district along Hillside Avenue. I think that will fit.
Yeah. Okay.
Along
Along Hillside Avenue.
Hillside Avenue.
Along Hillside Avenue.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
There we go. Okay. All right. Those good. It's exactly 9 p.m.
Oh,
All right.
thank you guys. It was a marathon, but it was good. Appreciate the
All
time.
right. So we're in shape to get these documents submitted. Well, as soon as we can to Karen, so she can make whatever formatting changes she thinks she wants to make,
Right. I will
rather
give her
than
yeah.
rather than waiting until this deadline of the 17th. We'll get them out.
Yeah, no, I'm going to do it as soon as I can over the weekend.
Yeah.
I'll get them. I'll do the
And I
adjustments.
think you did pretty much. I think you did. I said I'd send you changes tomorrow, but I think you already made them on the text. Do you want to just send me what you've got and I'll see if it's
Well, you have it. That's the document you're reading.
right. I know,
The-
but do you have it, or do you need me to send
Oh.
you a red line?
Send me your red lines just so
Okay,
I
I
have
will.
them, and then
I
I
will.
can cross check them.
I'll do that tomorrow.
That's fine.
Good.
Okay. I do think there's a lot of detail though in these maps, and it would be worth going through them and getting everybody's, I don't know how we do that, but at some point it would be nice to do that with the group. So maybe it is after we've submitted all our next meeting, we take some time to look at these maps. I don't know to what extent
I think we
everybody.
should try, if we're going to do it at all, it has to be at the next meeting.
Yeah, no, I know we have to.
Yeah.
we have
because-
to, there's enough here that people need to, hopefully they've looked at them and they've understand or have enough understanding of them to be able to weigh in on yes, no, I like it, I don't like it, I don't understand it, whatever.
Mhm.
But in an ideal world, I was hoping that all this could be done at another scale and actually have an area, have a satellite image so that you can actually see what's really there. But that's a lot of work.
No, nobody expects that.
So
Yeah.
I'm not, yeah, it would be great just for everybody to, it's so hard to read. A lot of people just can't read maps, or it just it's difficult to understand how they convert that in their brain. But well,
I want to make sure they really understand what we're talking about. So for example, if people say, oh, no, we don't want to rezone Crescent Street or whatever, we
I know.
respond to that. We
I
don't
know.
want them to be so confused that they don't know what
Right.
we're saying, you know?
Right. Which is why walking through them would be
Yeah.
helpful. But
Yeah.
again, it needs time.
But look, it took us 2 hours, although we were focused on other things too, other than the map. But it has to take a good hour
Oh,
to
I
go
know.
through this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
The other thing we could do is say for those people who are interested in doing this, we just set up another Zoom call. I don't know if that's, if we could do that, but if we don't have enough time in the meeting slotted, we do a zoning map meeting, and people who want to pay, come in and go over this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm happy to do it. We just do it on an evening, and we'll just say, here's a zoning map review.
That gets complicated because we'd either have to make sure we have a quorum.
Yes.
Or we'll have to form another subgroup and
a map group
and make a list of everybody who's on it,
Yeah.
What if we walk through them on a little video and just send out the video, or post the video somewhere for people to go through? Although
people look through it before the meeting, if they really look through it before the meeting.
I think if people, everyone's different. They're going to look at it and have to think about it and go back and forth and then try and make sense of it. Not everybody gets it as fast as the next person. I don't know. So it would be interesting to do that, but I don't know. I don't even know how I would do that.
Well,
I
see
could go
what,
through and I could literally point to them and move and talk about them and then, but wow.
well, you're
Yeah.
going to have some interaction with Karen Elska, so why don't we leave
Yeah.
it to you
Yeah.
on how we
Oh.
structure the presentation, and you try to work it out with Karen.
Yeah.
Um,
But Heidi, yeah, you're fast forwarding to when we do this as a community presentation.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I know. That's a really good thing
Yeah.
to think about because it needs to be presented very, and not everybody's going to get it. It's going to be, and there'll be questions and it'll be, it could
Well,
be,
there's going to have to be a lot of education that goes along with it, that's for sure.
And do you
Yeah.
want me to make a short document that's like highlights of the final MBTA guidelines? And
that would be good, Gene. I mean, it would
yeah,
be great. It would be very, very good to do that. An
Yeah.
executive summary
Yeah.
of the points as they relate to Needham.
yeah. And the DHCD sent a letter to every city and town, but it doesn't necessarily touch on the particular points that are of interest to us.
Yeah.
But
I
I
found-
could particularly there's something like that.
Well, I know that Katie King is also
Yep.
working on that.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
And
she
so
did the presentation to
you
you
might not
guys. Yeah.
want to duplicate efforts. Also, we need to know
Right.
if because I know that Needham asked that the Kendrick and the Modera and Charles River Landing possibly be included in our count.
But they're outside of the
I
zone.
know. I'm not weighing in on whether I think that's
Mm.
appropriate. I'm just saying that the town wrote a letter asking that it be included in the count. And if they are, then it really changes the scenario for us. So we
Yeah,
need to figure out if that's been allowed or not.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's a question.
90%. I think the answer is found in the chart that says 90% of our 50-acre minimum has to be within the half mile.
Yeah, well, I mean, personally,
So
I'm
that-
hoping that is the case, but
I hope so, yeah.
So then 10% could be outside. They're not going to make a special rule for Needham.
Yeah.
well,
Also,
But it
I'm just
could
telling
be-
you that the request was made. So we need
Yeah.
to ensure that we know the answer to that request.
yes,
Uh-huh.
I would
That's
not count on it right now. I think we got to factor on in.
I'll definitely touch base with Katie King. I don't want to duplicate efforts. If she's going to do something like that, beautiful.
And she's really very good
Yeah.
with all of that. So
All right. I'll get
Good.
in touch with her. Friday may not be the best day for the, town hall. I think is only open half a day. But maybe I'll just give her a call tomorrow and touch base.
yeah, just to make
Get it
just to
moving.
see what she's got planned.
Okay. All right. I'm glad you know that. All right. I didn't know if we had any attendees at all.
We did.
you? We
Yeah.
did?
We did.
Oh.
I don't know who Kalpana is, but it did notice that Ross Donald was there as well for a good portion of the meeting.
Okay.
Just one person?
Well, Kalpana is still there,
Okay.
Oh, okay.
and Ross Donald was on earlier.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Okay.
thank you for noticing that, Heidi.
Good,
Yeah.
Heidi. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the other question I guess I had was, is Lee doing another planning analysis with all these this changes of contiguous and developable land and the 15 unit gross density, and you have to include the roads and all this other stuff.
You will have to, because they have to get their
Yeah.
their report in by the end of this year on
The
what the
action
town is going to
plan,
do.
yes,
Yeah.
Yes. So I guess it's Katie, but Katie's not doing the planning analysis,
The-
right? She's doing a summary of, right? Or is she doing a planning analysis?
I think she's doing a potential analysis.
Maybe what she's doing is taking the report they did earlier, applying the revised guidelines and just updating that report. It was a good report.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess maybe I'll call Lee and see what she's up to, if she's
Yeah,
planning on doing another.
She's still on vacation, of course, and
Till
have to
when?
call her. Next week she'll be back, I believe. She's on vacation this week.
Okay, so I won't bother her until next week.
Mhm.
Okay, but I will get, yeah, I mean, I think that's more down the road. Right now, we just need to, I want to read, everybody is going to read these guidelines and chapter and verse and get them, understand them. Thank you, guys. Oh, shall we vote
Okay.
to adjourn?
Vote, oh, yes, yeah, is that a motion to adjourn?
Yes,
Oscar?
motion to adjourn. Motion to-
Okay, a motion to adjourn made by Oscar Mertz and seconded by Heidi Frail. Roll call vote. Oscar,
Yes.
Heidi,
Yes,
and I am, yes, so we're adjourned.
Okay, guys.
thank you.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.